Crime is everywhere and constantly on the rise. Quick and easy cases are solved daily, but what of those more sinister and cold cases that remain to be solved? Join host Ashley and Candy as they dive into the horror of some of these cases and shed some light on what is truly behind the realm of darkness. Now, here are your hosts of Realm of Darkness, Ashley Moreno and Candy Howard.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Realm of Darkness tonight. I feel a little fancy. I got a new microphone and headset. I kind of feel like, a little bit of a professional. Fancy. We're going to mix it up tonight. So I know we normally either talk paranormal or a little bit of true crime. We followed a couple different cases, but we're going to mix it up. We're actually going to talk about halfway houses and the court system and all the things that kind of tied into it. So tonight we actually have a special guest, also known as my husband. So let's go ahead and welcome Brian Moreno.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm excited to have you because I know some of your stories that you worked in a halfway house and some of the things you used to come home with. But, for people who don't know what it is, can you explain to us kind of what a halfway house is and what they do?
Yeah, I kind of consider a halfway house almost like an extension of the jail system, if you will. So, some of the facilities that I worked in we'd have jail overflow guys who were finishing out maybe a few days on their sentence. They were in jail. They would send them to us to kind of just ride them out. But it was also used as a diversion program as well. So some of the facilities that I worked in programs that I ran, they would be, you could actually get sentenced there from the court. And what we would do, they'd come in and we would work on them with everything from drug and alcohol addiction, helping them find jobs, helping them find housing, working on cognitive and social skills, mental health treatment, things like that. So we kind of hit every area that we could, that we knew that was negative, if you will, or affecting their lives negatively. And we would try to address that during their time in our programs.
Now, in these programs, you said that some of it was a sentencing, but could they also come straight out of prison to try to reacclimate into the world? Or was it just people that were sentenced instead of going to jail?
Yeah, it was both. So I worked in many all the facilities I think that company had. I think I worked in every one of them at some point over the 11 years. But the last one that I worked at was primarily that, where guys would be coming from prison and they'd be finishing off their last 6 months of a prison sentence. And I mean, they could have been in there for, a year, 2 years. They could have been there for murder, and they're coming out after 25 years and they're serving that last 6 months of their sentence with us. Again, trying to get them reacclimated into the community with, their family, jobs, you name it. Anything we found that we could address with them, we would do that. So yeah, it was the facility that I was in was mostly, we had some lower level felony guys in there, but a lot of them were coming from prison, federal and state prisoners. So there was a big array of different kinds of people in there: white collar crimes, white collar crimes, and then your regular high class felonies and things like that. So it was a big mix of people that were coming out of the prison system to us.
Geez. So with people that could have been sentenced for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you had to come across some pretty dangerous people. And my understanding is this halfway house isn't locked down like a jail.
No, this one actually wasn't. We have a one facility that was literally locked down, but this one wasn't. You could get out, but you couldn't come in, which is kind of weird, right? You think it'd kind of be the opposite, but the doors were locked from the outside. You couldn't get in, but if these guys wanted to walk out, they could. And you're right. Like I said, we had a lot of people in there, murderers, child molesters, you name a crime, I'm guaranteeing I came across a guy that had it. So yeah, and these guys were able to go out in the community after their sentences, and spending that last 6 months with us, because we had to get them out there to help them look for work. That we had home passes and things like that to help them get reacclimated with their family. Now they didn't go out initially, when they got in the program. They kind of had to get acclimated with us. We had to do our assessments on them to find out how long we should have them in the doors before they actually went out. But again, if they wanted to walk out the door, they could. But right there, that's a felony escape charge, which gets you minimum 3 years. So a lot of guys didn't take that risk.
So with those type of people just, walking around, chatting, coming in your office, whatever, what's the craziest, or I guess like most memorable, I guess we would call them, I don't really want to call them inmates. So what's the most memorable client or even the story that they had when you were there?
Yeah, we refer to them as clients. We didn't call them inmates or anything like that because there's such a negative connotation with that word, and we wanted to, they weren't like in our programs, we didn't have bars, you know what I mean? We have dorms, and it's not like a jail. It's kind of like a jail, but it's not, you know what I mean? It's like you're not locked up and things like that behind cell doors. So we didn't call them that. We called them clients. But 11 years, I have a lot of stories, and we don't have all that time to tell all the stories that I do have. But there's a few. Like one that comes to mind was a guy I was talking to. He was in prison for murder. I can't remember how long it was, but and when these guys come out, when they come to the program, I have their file, and I have what's called a PSI, a pre-sentence investigation, and it gives all the gory details of things that have happened. So, I'm reading all about murder cases and things that have happened. I'm reading about like child molestation cases, and just like some of the stuff you don't want to read about, you know what I mean? Especially when you have kids. But this one guy I was talking to, he came in my office. We were just kind of talking or whatever, and I didn't read this guy's PSI. I didn't think to read it, whatever. So we were talking, and I was, "What are you in here for?" And he's like, "Oh, I just got out after murder." And I was like, "Okay." And what'd you do? And he tells me the story about he came home one day. He was living with his parents still. He comes in the house, and his dad had a history of like domestic violence, beating up on his mom and things. So he said it happened or whatever a few times, and he kind of like let it go, whatever. It was when he was younger, but as he got older, you continue to see it happen and continue to see it happen. And at this point, he's an adult now, and he's living with his parents. And so one day he came home, and he saw a dad beating on mom and killed him with a screwdriver, stabbed him to death with a screwdriver. And I can't remember exactly how many times it was or anything like that, but it was stab wounds everywhere you could think of. And what happened after that was his mom and him ended up taking dad in the backyard, dug a hole underneath their swimming pool, their above ground swimming pool, and stuck dad under there in like a blanket or whatever it was, but stuck dad under the swimming pool. So dad kind of like went swimming with the fishes, if you will. That was probably like one of the craziest ones that I had. Like I said, there were so many, but that one just is real vivid to me just because, you sit there and think like, okay, I heard a lot of stories about murder. You got basic beefs with people, whatever. They're murdering people, whatever. But when you sit there and you don't see it coming because you don't read the guy's information before he comes in, and you talk to him, he's like, "Oh, I killed my dad." And I'm like, I can't even imagine like, throwing a swing at my dad, let alone killing him with a screwdriver at anything, and then burying him in the backyard with mom. Like it turned it into a family ordeal. Dad wasn't even there. Well, he was there, but
yeah, he was there.
That's what I was going to ask. Was it a flathead or a Phillips? But
I always imagine Phillips in my head. I feel like a flathead would be, they're both terrible, but I feel like at least your Phillips would probably penetrate a little bit better. It wouldn't be as bad. You know what I mean?
I feel like it wouldn't hurt as bad as maybe.
Right.
It's still going to hurt like hell.
Well, yeah, of course.
But
okay, so this guy killed his dad with a screwdriver. He walks in your office and tells you this story. If you didn't know this, like, would you have imagined this? Like, did he come across, because we see TV and we see these ID channels and things where you're like, oh yeah, there's something wrong with the guy. He's a killer. But did this guy even like have that type of like aura or anything?
It's really hard to figure out what guys are in there for just by looking at them. Like, there's been some of the sweetest guys you've ever talked to before. You find out that they do have murder charges, or, they do have charges against kids and things like that, and you're like, dang, that's crazy. And then you'll come across, some of these rough looking guys, and they're cussing you out every other day. And you find out that they stole somebody's wallet. You know what I mean? Like you can never really, it's really hard to put the crime with just looking at somebody. Like, that's why when they say don't judge a book by its cover, don't. And anytime I was in there, like I was, always on guard because like I'm around a facility full of 150, convicted felons, so I was always on guard. But yeah, it's like when you look at him, you can't tell. Like you can't tell. You could have a really straight-laced looking guy and he has a murder charge. Like I think about like Andy Dufresne from like Shawshank, right? And you think about that, you wouldn't think he's in there for murder. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of situation where you really can't tell.
See, that's crazy because I know that you did that. I mean, clearly I told everyone that you're my husband, but I mean, you were there for 10, almost 11 years. And in that situation, like I know that you would struggle turning it off. sometimes. And, you're lied to every single day. And people are always, not taking responsibility, not taking accountability. And you would come home and I would witness, somebody tell you something, you instantly didn't believe them. So, being in that situation for so long, like, how did you try to like have a normal life, but then still have that guard up with these clients?
See, I'm gonna tell the viewers this. Ashley's trying to make it sound all sweet, like she was all nice in the situation and I was the a-hole. But she cussed me out a few times when I came home like this. I remember it vividly. So don't let her think that she was all sweet and innocent. But
they know I would never.
Look, even Candy's laughing. She knows what's up.
Candy, you hush.
Look, I'm trying to see. But here's my question though. So, dealing with that day in and day out, do you feel like after that many years in it, though, it kind of hardened you a little bit to how you see people now?
Yeah, I can answer both of those. Yeah, I can answer both of those questions. Yeah, I mean, it was hard to turn off, even though like at the end of the day, my shift was over and stuff, I'm leaving, I'm coming home, and I had like at that time about a half-hour commute. You think you have some time to unwind and things like that, but yeah, it is hard to turn off. It's because you're constantly guarded all day long. You're constantly being an authoritarian person all day long, and me, I was a program coordinator, so I was kind of a important person in the building, if you will. So I had a lot of guys coming to me with a lot of issues. I had staff coming to me with all their issues. You know what I mean? So being engulfed in that all day long for 8 hours, sometimes 8 hours plus a day, and then coming home and trying to be like a quote unquote normal person, it was hard because just that transition from that work life to home life was really hard, and the thing is you actually mentioned that I would do it. I didn't really notice, like, at first, and she starts bringing it up. I'm like, yeah, like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm like talking to her and I'm talking to other people the way I was talking to my clients, and they're two completely different people. Like, I don't, you got to communicate with people differently, obviously. And sometimes it would come home with me. And, and that was a lot of the reason why I got out of the field in general. I wasn't even setting out to get in that field in the first place. Like, I'm a communication major with a sociology minor. And I think the reason I got drawn to it was because of that sociology side of me, like kind of with dealing with people and things like that. And for me or anybody, to be honest, to be in the correctional system for 11 years, like by choice, like you got to be a crazy person, because like I felt like that's what I was at the end of it. And, it's something I would never get into again because, like I said, the person that kind of makes you, it does change you. And I'm getting better now because I've been out of there for 4.5, almost 5 years now. But yeah, I'm constantly like guarded, like all the time. And what I mean by that, not necessarily with like my people, like my close people, but like with anybody that is trying to get to know me or I'm trying to get to know, like, I'm always thinking, what are they up to? And when I'm out in public now, like, where's the nearest exit? Like, who looks like what? Like, who looks like a threat? It's just ingrained in me to do that, which I'm glad that part is ingrained in me because it keeps us safe, safer when we're out. I'm aware and I know my exits and I know kind of like what to do in those situations. So like I credit that to those years. But yeah, I feel like I said, it's been like 5 years of me getting out of there now. And I'm just now starting to feel normal, if you will, and starting to be like happier person in general. And I think too, having a kid helped, I think that, like you said, you were asking Candy, does it harden me? Like, it kind of did. And then I have a kid and now, I'm a little bit more sensitive, a little bit, not much, a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more, but yeah.
Well, and I mean, up to this point so far, it sounds very negative. But there were some positives that come out of it. I mean, you're a very protective person of the ones that you love. When we meet new people too, not just when you meet new people, but like when I meet new people or when I bring friends around, you're instantly protective. And you're like, okay, what do they want from you? What is their deal? And you tend to see things in people that we don't see right away just because you do have that experience. So there is some type of positivity in it. I mean, it's
perspective to things that other people are going to glaze over because you notice those little nuances. I think that's definitely positive.
Well, and the reading of the body language, like that's one thing that I think Brian's great at, is that he can read somebody's like aura. He can read their body language, their mannerisms, and he'll straight out tell me there's something not right with that person. And I'm like, you met him 10 minutes ago. How do you know this? But anyway, moving on to a more controversial topic because that's what I like. And you're with two women, so you better be very careful on how you word these. But
Ooh.
I know that you were in a women's facility and a men's facility. And, I've heard you say on multiple occasions that you feel that women are treated differently than men, that you think that women get a little bit easier than men do. Why?
I don't know the answer why. I have my assumptions and my opinions on why. But I mean, just by comparison, I would have women's files in front of me and men's files in front of me, and I'd look at them, and you got two people with very similar criminal backgrounds. And with the women's file, I see a lot less time served than the men's file. And I'm like, why is this? And this happened frequently. It happened frequently. And what it comes down to is a couple of things. I think the main thing, honestly, is what courts look at is the kids. I think kids are a big factor in it, because in the criminal justice system, when you got, say, mom and dad in there, like, moms are going to be more likely to take care of kids than the dads are. Just the way it is. Like, it's a statistical fact that's kind of how it is. So I feel like the courts go a little bit easier on the women to get them out sooner, to get back to their kids, which that's cool. I get it. It's great that they're trying to get the moms back to the family and things like that. My thing is, you shouldn't do the crime. You can't do the crime. Or you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the main reasons why I think that it kind of comes down to women getting lesser sentences than men. I mean, because you sit there and you think about career criminal, right? When you hear the term career criminal, what do you think? You typically think of a man, right? Mm-hmm. I do. I still do, but There's women out there that, I mean, I would see in these facilities constantly, like year after year, month after month, they're coming back there for the same things, for different things, so you have your women career criminals too. But again, like, I wouldn't see them serving much jail time. I wouldn't see them serving much prison time, and they're getting these diversion programs and things like that. And to me, they're getting off easy, and they're not learning their lesson, because you're not spending much time in these places, and you get used to them. Okay, I can do a couple months. I can do 5-6 months. You get used to it, and that's all they're getting, and they're going to continue to recidivate. And that's kind of how I saw it. But you'd have, like, men, again, with the same crimes, and they're doing years in prison and things like that. There's no early release for them in some cases. They're not allowing them to go to the halfway houses from prison for the last 6 months and things. So I don't know. I think that's the main reason, honestly. But also, too, there's the fact of the women tend to not reoffend as much as men do. So that's also the thing, too. Even though, like I said, I would see repeat offenders from women, statistically, you're going to see women offend a lot less than men. So I think they're kind of given some grace in that for that reason too.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, because, it's kind of an interesting subject, because, it kind of comes across as, like, once you catch a case that
I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there.
I knew you were going to do this.
This used to drive me nuts. This used to drive me nuts with the women and the men when they would say, "Oh, I caught a case," and I would sit down and tell them, "I'm like, you didn't." I was like, "What'd you catch it with? Like a net?" And they would look at me like, "What are you talking about? Did you catch it with a net?
SpongeBob.
Like a SpongeBob, or did you catch it with like a plastic bag? What do you mean?" And they would look at me like, "What do you mean? Did I catch it?" So you can't catch a case. Like, you're saying that to not take responsibility for what you did. I caught a case. It happened to me. No, you did it. So I would always sit them down and yell at them, and that's why I don't like hearing that term. I hate that term. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, when somebody first catches a case, it seems like once they get their first case, that it's just easier for them to just continuously offend and continuously return to this. But why? That's like, I feel like if I caught a case, then I would be nervous. Yeah, I would be scared. Like, I'd be like, crap, I mean, I don't have a rap sheet, but I would be nervous. I'm like, look, I'm too mouthy for prison. I'm probably going to get shanked. I'm not good at Oriana House because I don't like to just sit in a room by myself sometimes. But I feel like my first time I would kind of divert me to ever do it again. But it seems like once they realize it's not that bad, then they're like, oh, well, they just kind of keep going with it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why people reoffend. Obviously mental health plays a role in it. There's like the majority of the people I dealt with had mental health issues, and the majority of people I don't want to say the majority of people, but there's a lot of people in prison and jails who have mental health issues that, play a big role in them continuing to commit crimes and things like that. So I think that's part of it, but also too, like you said, sometimes there's people that, you do something once, you go to jail, it scares you and you're like, I don't want to do that ever again. And then you're kind of back on the straight and narrow. Then you got people, like you said, who kind of get used to it. And, they always throw that term around, institutionalized. Well, I 100% believe that term. There was a guy that I had in my facility one time. He was like, I remember him saying he was in our program. This was when he wasn't coming from prison. This was his last step before going to prison. So this program that I was in, it was a 6-month program. And if you messed that one up, then you were going to prison. And I just remember him sitting there telling me, like, almost daily, he's like, man, he's like, I really want to go back to prison. I'm like, for what? I'm like, what are you talking? Who says that? He's like, man, he was like saying some racial things. He was a black dude. He's like, man, I really miss my N-words. I want to go back to prison. I'm like, dude, you are crazy. Like, you don't want, and he legitimately, like, he meant it. Like, because he had people in there. He wanted to go back there because that's where he was comfortable at, and I think people do get comfortable in the system. And honestly, too, it's lucrative for some people. Like, you go to jail, you can become a person who can, like, get drugs in, you can do that kind of thing. You can make a lot of money as a jail prisoner, or in our programs too. Our programs were very loose. Like, we would pat people down and things like that when they're coming into the programs, but we're not doing strip searches and things like that. These guys knew it. They were smuggling drugs in left and right. So you could make a lot of money as a person, bringing drugs into the facility. So some people do it for money too. Like, they'll be cool with going back because they can make a lot of money in there. But yeah, that's kind of reason that I think kind of why people keep continuing to reoffend. And, like I said, some people just don't get it. They don't learn, and they just continue to do the same thing over and over again. And, just not learning from it causes them to continue to stay in the cycle.
Yeah.
I think too, I mean, there's so many factors that play into why people reoffend. I mean, for some, it's a better life, in prison than outside. They're treated better than what they ever were, out on the streets. Some
Three
people,
hats and a cat.
Yeah, I mean, some people that's what they were raised in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's all they know. No one ever taught them any different. So they've been, offending since they were very young. So to them, that's okay. Well, this is what you do. You hustle and, you get caught. Well, then you go to jail.
Yep.
Yeah,
but
you're exactly right.
Yeah, one of the things I'm really interested in, and I know we got to break to commercial.
Yes. Sorry, I almost interrupted you like 3 times. But before we get into that controversial thing, because yes. I know kind of where you're going, I know where I want to go with this conversation. So let's take a quick break.
Yes.
That way, when we come back, we can really dig into the dirty stuff.
That's good.
Welcome back to Realm of Darkness. We have Brian with us today. We're talking a little bit of injustice. And one of the biggest things that I want to talk about and kind of get into is, the different gender status, social status, race, and all of that. And if that has something to do with, what your sense is going to be. Because I do think that your gender can determine your sensing. I think that your social status can absolutely determine your sensing, as well as your race. But, I've never worked in any type of corrections. So, Brian, I'd like to kind of see where you feel on that, because I do feel that there's a lot of injustice in the courts. I think that, like you said, men do get worse sensing than women. I think richer people get less sensing than people who are poorer. And I think, unfortunately, I'm going to say it, I think Black get a lot harder sensing than white. And same with Hispanic. I mean, Brian, you're of Mexican descent, and I want to bring that up. I think that if you committed a crime and I committed a crime, I might get a slap on the wrist, but I think you're going to do time. And I just don't think it's fair. And I want to get into that and kind of your opinions on those things.
Yeah, I 100% believe that all that plays a factor. Like I kind of touched on the female male thing. But yeah, definitely when it comes to race, people have biases, right? I mean, everybody, us in this room right now, we have biases, right? Whether we want to admit it or not, we have biases. I'm not saying we're prejudiced or discriminatory towards anybody, but we have biases towards certain people, and some of those things can come out, I feel like, in sentencings and things like that, with judges and things. And, just looking at the prison system, of the incarceration in general, like, I read a stat recently that like in 2010, you got black men incarcerated at a rate of like 3,000 black men to every 100,000 residents is incarcerated. And then you got like 1,200 per 100,000 Latinos. And then you look at the white population, 459 per 100,000. Like that tells you everything you need to know right there. It's not that, blacks or Latinos are committing more crimes. I mean, they're not like, they're just, you're getting more of them incarcerated. And so I think that stat right there tells you what it is.
So let me be devil's advocate. And I just want to put out there that this is not my opinion, but I've heard people use this as an argument. They're going to say, well, Latinos and Black, they grew up in poorer areas. So they're more likely to steal. They're more likely to have assault. They're more likely to have crime, which I think is BS. I mean, I do think that your environment has a lot to do with it. But I also don't think that just because maybe you didn't grow up with a lot of money and just because of your color or your religion or your race that should be played into your sentencing.
No, it shouldn't, but it is.
But I mean, if you're a rich white boy,
you get off on things.
You can commit crimes and they're gonna be like, oh, don't do it again.
But if you really want to go back to what this country was built and founded upon, go back to everything that was written when this country was founded. And it was founded by rich white men. And go through and read the Declaration of Independence and read what it says about white people versus what it says about people of color. So Black people weren't considered people. Indigenous people like me were called merciless Indian savages. You weren't even talked about. You were lumped in there with me because we were the same people, just a different tribe. So,
well, even now, I've had, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but, I've had companies that I've worked for that found out that Brian was Mexican, and they would make jokes about, oh, I'm sure he's got a lot of cousins to help mow the lawn. And I'm like, what age are we in? Like, seriously, like, you're how old and you're making these comments? It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, in their defense, I do have a lot of cousins. I had 11 aunts and uncles, so I have a lot of cousins.
Yes, you kind of live up to that.
But ironically, none of them worked in lawn care, so I don't know.
You did, though.
I have 9 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So, I have 1.
But this country and the judicial system was founded upon these racial things. And unfortunately, it has perpetuated, and it has always been one of those things that has just been accepted, and it's been ingrained within society and within culture, and people just don't question it. They just accept it as, well, that's the way it is.
Well, that's
every time I think about, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ash.
No, I was just saying, that's why I think that, if we had a Black teenager commit a crime, and then we have a white teenager commit a crime, I would almost bet money that Black teenager is going to get a harsher sentence than this white teenager. They're going to come up with every reason in the book that this Black teenager, oh, he grew up in a poor home, his dad's thing, all the cliches, of course. Right. And then the white teenager, whoever, is going to be like, oh, well, let's look at what their mom and dad do. Let's look at what neighborhood they grew up in. Let's look at all of those facts.
It would ruin their life, right? It would ruin their life for them to have a sentence, to go to prison. They just made a mistake, right? We've seen that before. That
reminds me exactly of that case with Brock Turner.
Yes.
You guys know that Brock Turner case, the whole rape thing or whatever. So the kid was supposed to get, I think he was looking at a possible 14 years.
For anybody who doesn't know the Brock Turner case, can you explain just a quick kind of overview of what happened?
Yeah. So basically he was convicted of rape. It was either rape or sexual assault. I can't really remember.
Rape.
Okay, rape. Yeah, which is obviously worse. But in any event, he was convicted of rape. He was going to college at the time, and the defense and everybody was talking about like, oh, you can't send this kid to prison. He has such a bright future. He was going to lose his scholarships and blah, blah, all this sad stories about this kid. Like, you literally got convicted of rape, right? You should be going away for some years. You know, you should be on the sex offender list. You should be the whole 9 yards, right? So that's what happened with this kid. And he goes to trial, and he gets basically next to nothing. Like, he was looking at 14 years. He ended up getting, what was it, 6 months in jail, 3 years of probation. And I think he had to get on the sex offender registration. I can't remember exactly, but in any event, he could look at 14 years and he got slapped on the wrist because of this defense of, oh, he has such a bright future. Like, I don't care. Like, you committed rape, bro. Like, you should be going to jail. I don't care who you are, what color you are. You committed to me one of the worst crimes you can commit. Like, and you can, if that was a black dude up there or a Mexican dude up there who didn't have as great of a future possibly or whatever, see ya. Like, they're gonna send you on the next bus going to prison, and without no questions asked.
Well, and the BS thing about that case is, he first it was rape, and this poor girl had to go through the trial. She had to tell her story, and they knocked it down because they said that technically he didn't commit rape because I'm going to try to say this politically correct for the station. He inserted digits into lower body parts of hers versus inserting genitals. So that is why they said it's not rape. For me, any type of penetration that is not welcome should be considered rape, because now this poor girl went to that college and she has to go. Everybody knows her face. Everybody knows her name. So now she forever is going to be that girl that was raped. And Brock Turner is just going to be living his life with his scholarships, going on and making a life for himself. And this girl is going to have this trauma from it. And I think it's awful. And you're right. If it was a black guy that did it, or a Hispanic guy, or even an Asian guy, nobody really talks about Asians, but if it was anybody else but a rich white guy, well, look at Alec Murdaugh. Same thing. Same thing. Yeah.
And the thing that really gets me with that case in particular is that poor girl has to live the rest of her life completely. She's got to pick up the pieces of her life, completely ruined, completely in shambles. And there was never any emphasis put on what about her.
Well, and she blames herself because, one of the things that they said is, well, you shouldn't have been drinking. Right. Okay, well, you know what? I was 18 and 19 before. And hell, I'll be honest, the first time Brian and I went out, I was crying in the driveway. I didn't even know I was home. And
true story.
I did.
Good thing I was driving.
But I mean, we're kids, and that's part of life. Is you're going to get drunk, you're going to party, you're going to have these experiences. So the fact that this poor girl now feels that it's her fault because she had a few drinks, when many of us have, it's ridiculous. Yeah, thanks, Courtney.
I'm loving Courtney's comments over here, by the way.
No, but Courtney's right. Any unwanted contact should be considered rape. But getting back to the race and the social status is, yes. And Brian, you have a story where race affected how something happened for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was in college. This was my proudest moment, but I'm going to share it with y'all anyway. We were speaking of college and drinking. We were drinking down at the bars, and we lived close enough we could just walk home, which was great. So I'm walking home, and I had to pee. I had to pee, and I found this dumpster next to this Firestone auto place or whatever. And I go behind the dumpster, and I'm just doing my thing. And my roommate was with me at the time. He's a white guy. He was with me at the time. And he's like tall, white, handsome, right? And he's good looking dude. So
you should write his profile.
so he saw me. He's like, all right, well, I got to pee too. So he goes back there. So we're just both, peeing or whatever. And all of a sudden cops roll up. I'm like, oh no. And we put him away. And then we're sitting there like looking at the cop and stuff. And then, the cop's like, what are you guys doing? And we're going through the whole rigmarole with the cops. And then, we're both arguing with the cop. Like, we're both like, leave us alone. We're just going home. It's no big deal. But going the whole 9 yards, right? What happens to me? I ended up getting arrested at that time, getting a disorderly conduct charge. They sent my friend home. He got to walk the rest of the way home. We did the exact same thing. pretty much said the exact same things, and all of a sudden I'm in the back of a cop car because I'm getting my my disorderly conduct charge written up on me at the time, and he goes home scot-free. I mean, do I know that was the reason why? I don't know, but between what he and I, right? But between what he and I did, we did the same exact thing, got treated differently, and I was like, ever since that, I've been convinced because of that those types of things definitely happen.
Well, and we even have a mutual friend who, he was out. It was, I think, back in the 80s. Brian, correct me if I get any of these details wrong, but it was back in the 80s. He is a Black man. He was walking home, got jumped by a group of white guys that had been kind of harassing him throughout the night. There was a scuffle. There was, unfortunately, a situation where somebody did get hurt, and these guys got nothing, and he got 10 years. 10 years. That, I mean, in a nutshell, can almost ruin somebody's life depending on the age. If that's in between your 20s, 30s, that's when you're meeting your spouses, you're having children and all these things. And luckily he didn't get to miss out on that, but he could have, right? Because he defended himself, which is ridiculous.
Yep. Happens all the time.
Yeah. And Courtney, your last comment about you're also raising Latino American children. It is scary. One of my best friends, she's white and her husband is Black, and she won't allow her son to have any type of toy guns, even if they're white with orange tips. She will not let it happen. And Brian and I have a son, and he clearly is of Hispanic descent. And, those thoughts have run through my mind. He does look a little bit lighter, so you can't really tell that he's Hispanic, but those things do run through my mind. And it's scary that children don't understand that they can't be normal children because our world is so screwed up.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that brings me to back to the court system. Let's go back to the justice system. So, if somebody is of color, or even a poor upbringing, are they given the opportunities that these rich, I don't even want to say, but these white people are, and, are they set up for success as well as, say, your white clients? Do they get the counseling? Do they get the mental evaluations? Are they given all the tools to make them successful and be able to reintroduce them into life? Or is it kind of one of those, they're just going to come back because they're being judged by their color?
It kind of depends on the court, honestly. Like, some are better than others, but when they do send them to a program like that I was in, we did a ton of assessments on the guys. We did assessments on their mental health. We did assessments on family life, how well they do with employment, like cognitive skills things. Like, I even taught some of those cognitive skills classes. Like, there's a ton of stuff that we did to address these issues. So, there'd be situations though where the court just would refuse to use us as a service and would send the guys to jail. And honestly, that's not helping anybody. You know what I mean? You're sending people to jail. Yes, they're supposed to be like places of rehabilitation, but there really isn't a lot of good jails out there doing good rehabs at all. They're getting better with programs and things like that. But a program like mine, which was more dedicated to those types of things, like, it's a better place for them as far as that's concerned. But like I said, there'd be times they wouldn't even consider using our program. They would just send the guys to jail. And again, I don't really think that helped them at all because they're not getting any good programming and things like that. So like I said, it kind of depends on the court, and it even goes like individual judges and things like that. They have different ideals on how they handle these types of things. But so when they came to us though, like we did a lot of good assessments on the guys to figure out and pinpoint really what we wanted to work on with them, let them have their input too. Because obviously their buy-in was important. So we made sure that we know what they wanted to work on, and we pretty much put together like a comprehensive case plan for the guys to work on while they were there. So it's up to them to put the work in with those types of things. But yeah, I wouldn't say like when it came to our facilities, as far as who got what kind of programming, whatever, I don't think race ever played a factor. I think that we all did a very good job of just looking at the person, assessing the person and their situation, and hooking them up with what we needed to do. Because, it wasn't like a cookie cutter situation either, because we would do all these assessments and, we would then, it comes out to a score, and you got like low, medium, and high. And what that means is like their potential to recidivate, which means to reoffend. And, if you have a low guy and you got a high guy, they're not going to go through the same programming together. Because if you do put like a low level offender in a bunch of high level programming, that actually does more damage than good. So there was a lot of assessments and figuring out how much programming would be tailored towards each individual. So, like I said, if they would use us, I think the guys had a good chance as far as like getting good skills and learning new things. But again, it was up to them to put the work in. We could only lead them to water. We couldn't make them drink, So, but yeah, like as far as that's concerned, it kind of just depends on the court and what they want to do with the people. And if they want to send them to jail, then that's not really helpful in most cases.
Yeah. Well, and there's two things I do when I ask. They're two kind of different spectrums, but maybe you can kind of talk about them in both aspects. So, I guess the first question is, do you think that some of the clients felt more comfortable coming to you because you are a minority? Do you felt like they kind of thought that you would understand them more, you would be more lenient toward them or that thing? And then into that, well, you answer that first and we'll go to the next one.
Well, they knew I wasn't going to be lenient. Like I was always known as that dude that goes by the book. You know what I mean? Because like I was always about, I wasn't doing anybody any favors if I was letting you get away with stuff or get off the hook or treating you differently or whatever. Like I wasn't that guy. So they always knew me as like the guy that's going to pretty much enforce the rules. But I do feel like, and I mean, there's a lot of times too where minority clients would come up to me and they would, you could just tell their interaction with me was different than with my white counterparts and such. And they did feel more comfortable with me just talking, it's just because it's just the way it is. Honestly, like if you look at minorities seem to be more comfortable around other minorities. It's just kind of the way it is. Even now, that's kind of how I feel personally. Like I feel more comfortable around Mexican and Black people than I do white people. And it's weird. I'm half white myself, but like, it's just because of how the people I've always surrounded myself with, I'm always more comfortable. So yes, I feel like they did do that a lot, but they knew they weren't going to get nothing over on me. They knew it was going to happen, but they, I was able to speak to them in a way that made them feel comfortable and, make them feel heard. There was a lot of guys that would say, man, I ain't gonna go talk to that white boy over there. I want to holler at you. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, whatever. I was like, don't refer to him as that white boy over there. Just, he has a name. Like, but yes, we can come talk or whatever. And then I was able to get things done. And other minorities that worked there were able to get things done differently just because of who we were. And the guys knew that. And even the females, the same way. Even the females were like that when I dealt with them.
Well, they probably understand that, if they've dealt with racism in their life, they probably assume that you have too, and that there's a little bit more of an understanding. Now, with that, do you think in general that courts, cops, jury, do you think that they give harder sentences to minorities? And do you think it's a lack of knowledge, or do you think it's just ingrained in them because of the media and social media and the news and all the things that we see?
Everything you just said has a factor in it. I mean, you're going to have cops out there who don't like Black people. You're going to have Black cops out there who don't like white people. And it goes both ways, right? You're going to end up having to see them possibly treating somebody differently because of that. So, I mean, I feel like it happens all the time. The shows that you see on TV, Cops and like Real PD and all those other shows, like that's all a bunch of BS. The way those cops are acting a lot of times is because they're on TV and they know it. Now that we have body camera stuff, I'm glad we have the body camera stuff because it's actually helping a lot, because now they know they're being recorded and they're going to start treating people, with respect in most cases. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it happens. Like I said, everybody has their own biases, right? So if you go out there and you're working in the field or whatever, if you come across a Black dude and you don't like him, you have a potential to maybe not treat him the same as you would somebody white. It's going to happen. So I feel like it happens a lot. I mean, I think there's a hell of a lot more good cops than there are bad cops out there. So don't get me wrong about that. But, there are the bad apples out there that are going to give a bad name to everybody else and in the justice system. And the same thing goes for the courts. It's really hard to like pinpoint. I've been in many a courtroom and I've watched many a trial and been part of, been questioned by grand juries and everything else. And it's really hard to like tell if a judge is doing that for a different reason. You can kind of see a track record based on all their cases, but if you just like kind of watch them individually, it's hard to like pinpoint and identify if they're doing that. But yeah, I guarantee it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. This case. So I don't know, many, many years ago, I was hit by a drunk driver. And this drunk driver, I was sitting at a red light. And, long story short, Brian and I went to court. I mean, it was the first time I'd ever gone into a court. I wanted Brian to go with me. And this guy had like 27 DUIs, a suspended license, no insurance. He had, it was probably the longest sheet I've ever seen of DUI, DWI, whatever, all the different things. And he got like 6 months in a halfway house?
Yeah, I don't even remember. It might not even been that long. I think it was actually shorter than that. But yeah, ironically he ended up being placed into the program I was working at the time.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
Tell him that story.
It was crazy.
Well, he was so drunk, to throw it out there, he was so drunk that he told the cops that he hit me because I didn't go on a maroon light. And then I believe, if I get it correct, that he blew 3 times over the legal limit. And this was like 2.5 hours after he hit me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this dude was blitzed. But yeah, so he ends up, we're in the court listening. And I remember the judge saying, okay, we're going to sentence you to X amount of days in blah, blah halfway house. And blah, blah halfway house was my halfway house. I'm like, oh, Lord have mercy. So I was like, all right, that's cool. So we'll see how this goes. So I remember looking on the intake list every day to see when he was going to show up or whatever. And I found out when he was showing up, and I told Ashley, I was like, hey, he's coming this date or whatever. And at the time I was
make sure you get my money for that insurance.
Yeah. And anytime we ended up having somebody that we had any sort of like quote unquote relationship with, we had to fill out a form saying, hey, I know this person and this is how I know them. So I had to fill that out. And at the time, I was the program coordinator, and I supervised the case management staff. So I was basically the one who would assign the new clients that came in to their caseworker. And I was like, I know who I'm going to give them to. So I gave him to this caseworker or whatever. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know about this dude. This is who he is and what happened. She's like, are you serious? I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh, I remember you telling me that story when it happened. And I was like, yeah, that's him. He's in here. So he ends up getting assigned to her. And, we, again, like even when it comes to sentences like that, like say, for example, he was sentenced for like, let's say 60 days or whatever. If you're like on that lower end or of that assessments that we do, there's a potential for you to get out earlier, because again, keeping people incarcerated longer than they should be based on their assessments can do more harm than good as well. But I kind of let him sweat more days than he probably should have in there, because that was kind of messed up on my part. But there was other things there was other things he did have to do still. Like I didn't keep him in there, but there was other stuff he had to do that we could have like said, hey, you could take care of this after this and whatever. But yeah, then he finally his last day there, I went up to him and I was like, do you know who I am? And he's like, yeah, you're Brian, you're the program coordinator. Yeah, no, I said, do you know who I am? And he's like, I was like, that was that's my girlfriend that you hit. He just looked at me like his eyes were wide as saucers. He's like, oh man. I was like, yeah. I was like, he's apologized. And I was like, don't apologize to me. I said, what I want you to do as an apology, and don't get behind that wheel again and drink and drive. Right. And don't be blitzed like that. And you could run into somebody else and potentially kill them. Like I gave him the whole speech and everything else. And I mean, he was a great client while he was there. Don't get me wrong. Like he did everything he needed to do. He was respectful. He listened to everybody and did his thing. But like, it was just passing this dude every day. Like I wanted to punch him in the face, like because I knew what it was,
When he hit me, like I said, I was sitting at a red light and I was at a 4-way. He hit me so hard that he ricocheted off my car across, I think at that time, 4 lanes and into a CVS sign. And then he backed up. And I called Brian and I'm like, what do I do? I've never been in a car accident. And I was right down the road from his house. So he's like, call the cops, I'm on my way. And this guy comes up and he's like, I'll give you $400. And I'm like, my car. And when Brian showed up, he was actually getting into his truck to leave. And the only reason he didn't drive away, and I'm telling you, he was stumbling, he was mumbling, his car was trashed, my car was trashed. The only reason he didn't leave is because Brian and then like a passerby stopped and they kept him from leaving before the cops got there. Right. And Akron, Ohio, they take forever.
Right. Man.
We waited. I could have walked home by that time.
It was terrible.
Keeping him there, and it's just the whole situation. But I will tell you that I did get my insurance money. So thanks for that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, just thankfully he didn't kill you or anybody else. In the process. I mean,
he hit hard. And I mean, I'm surprised that my car wasn't totaled.
Right.
I think he kind of hit it at an angle, but still now again, if that would have been Brian, would he have been sent to a halfway house or would he have done time? Because with 27 DUIs and a suspended license and I think the license plate was expired. And I mean, anything this guy could have had, he had. And it was and he was a bartender. Like that was his job. It was awful.
I mean, I've seen people go to jail for 2 years with 3 DUIs.
Yes.
I mean, you know, it just, it
we have a friend right now.
Shout out. I'm going to say his name, but shout out.
Yeah, right. I don't know if he's watching, but we see you. But, you know, again, bringing it back to the court system. So, you know, with some of these cases that are bigger and some of these cases that are more, you know, detailed and in depth, you know, we leave it in like the jury's hands and the judge's hands. And we have to hope that the people that are responsible for our futures are sound enough to, you know, make the decisions, that they don't have any type of racist issues. And I do think that media plays into that because
absolutely.
Well, perfect example, you know, you might be racist and not realize it because, and I will be, you know, if you're on a plane and say somebody comes into the plane with a turban on, your first thought is going to be 9/11. And that's not fair to that person. But because of 9/11 and our experiences in the media, it's almost kind of ingrained in us because we went through this tragedy and now we kind of put Muslims and plane crashes together.
It's that fear mongering.
Yes. And it's not that, you know, I don't feel that I'm a racist person, but I'm also going to say if God forbid, you know, somebody with a turban sits in front of me, my first thought's gonna be like, oh, you know, and it's not that I feel anything against them. So when we're going into these court systems and we're standing in front of these people, we have to hope. I mean, I'm a white female. I got it easy. We'll just put that out there. But, you know, you guys, if you guys go through, you have to hope that these people don't have some type of outside influence that's going to kind of sway their decision one way or the other.
Listen. Let me tell you about juries. And let me tell you, when I run for political office, this is going to be one of my issues that I'm going to stand on. I hate the fact that we still have juries made up of our peers. I think it's a stupid concept. I think it doesn't think about how many people we have walking around this earth that you might come in contact with every day. And you're like, that person's an idiot, right? And we got these same types of people who were selected for juries just because they are a registered voter. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't want these people like this. And this is my thing. I would much rather we have people who go to law school for years to become lawyers. You got to be a lawyer for like 7 years to become a judge, so on and so forth, right? Why do we not have professional jurors? Why do we not have a degree in college where you have to go and you be a professional juror? You know the law inside and out like everybody else. And you go up there and you're assigned the case with eight people in the jury. I don't even remember. In any event, you have 8 of those same people who come together, all races, all different backgrounds and everything else, but they have the education to make an educated decision on these people's sentences, not Tom who works at the tire shop down the street because he votes. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me because
what's being said during the trial and actually able to understand.
Well, and they should have to do a mental evaluation. They should have to do psychology classes. They should have to be able, you know, profiling. You know, that's a big thing in criminal justice is taking profiling and being able to read a person's mannerisms, their body language. Are they lying? Are they, I don't know, what is it, up and to the right? They're lying or something like that. I don't remember because I look all over the place. So people probably think I'm just lying all the time. But they should have, Brian, you're right. They should have to take these same courses. I mean, the judge has to do it. These people are going to hear terms, but they probably have no idea what they're meaning. Like, and they're going based off of pure feeling.
Right.
You know,
I mean, you're presented the facts, but it's still at the same time, you got people who just aren't cognitive enough to understand the facts sometimes. And it's like, I guarantee you, if we had something in place like that in our country or wherever, like, I guarantee you those wrongful convictions that happen, and they happen a lot. Like, they happen a lot. You might see a couple on the news where somebody's exonerated because they found out later they were wrongfully convicted. I can guarantee you it happens 10 times more than what they show you on TV, those good cases about somebody being exonerated. And I guarantee you, if we had juries in that way, I guarantee we would have less wrongful convictions of these people spending years in prison because they didn't commit a crime, you know?
Yes, because
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Somebody spending 30 years of their life in prison due to a wrongful conviction and they were exonerated because of, DNA evidence or something like that is just appalling. Yes. It's appalling. It never should have happened in the first place. And, they're like, oh, well, here, let's give you some money. Like, that's a compensation for appreciate it. But what can they do the rest of their life? You've taken their life.
Well, and the problem too is some of these people that are going into the courts, they don't have the means to have the best of lawyers. And when you have jury that are just picked off the streets because they vote, and let's be honest, some people don't even, they just filled it out when they were like, 18, and we're like, whatever. But it relies on how good your lawyer is and how persuasive your lawyer is. And, if, say, Joe Schmo down the road is up for sexual assault and he had nothing to do with it, but he doesn't have two dimes rubbed together, his case is not going to be as strongly built as Alec Murdaugh. I mean, that's a different case, but you know what I'm saying is somebody like Alec has the money to pay for that, but somebody from Akron might not have it.
And I'll just throw this out there. OJ Simpson, let's just
Lord.
OJ did it. I'm going on record. Right? OJ did it. I'm going on record right now.
I mean,
100%.
Is Tupac alive?
No, unfortunately not. But with all the AI that's coming out, you're going to be hearing a lot more songs done by him. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, there's
all the random questions out right now.
There's way, in this country, if you're white or you got money, that's the two ways to stay out of jail.
Well, and I shouldn't say this because this makes me sound awful, but it's like a running joke between me and Brian. We like to play fight. We'll argue. We'll yell. People think we hate each other. We really don't most of the time.
Most of the time.
But one of the things I say to him is like, you better be nice. I'm a white girl. If I scream, you're going to jail.
And she's right.
I mean it in a joking manner because I would never falsely accuse him of that. But in reality, if I called the cops and said, hey, he hit me and just kind of did one of these.
There's no questions asked. They're taking him.
He's going to jail. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I say it in a funny manner, but in reality, it's a racist comment,
Which it is. But he's your husband. You're allowed. I mean.
Well, technically, I'm not. That's like saying I have a lot of Black friends. That's not the same. Like, you can't say that. But I mean, it's just like simple things like that. And it's just sad, And I mean, to bring racism, because we're running out of time, but it is sad in today's world that, as a Black man or Hispanic, whatever, you get pulled over, you can't move until they tell you to move. Me, I'm fumbling through my purse, pulling things out, and I have no fear. And it's just the way that you guys were raised versus me. Cameron, he has toy guns, he has all these things, but my friend's son, who is biracial and he's darker, he can't have these simply because he's a kid. And we had a child here. Oh my gosh, his name is escaping me, Brian. The little boy who had the gun that ended up getting shot in Cleveland.
It's about Trayvon Martin.
The real young, he was like 11.
He was a teenager. I don't remember his name.
You know who I'm talking about? This was years ago, but he was shot and killed. And it's like, would that have happened if he was white?
Right.
And it's a sad world. It is a sad world. And unfortunately, I don't think racism is ever going anywhere. I think we just have to continue to fight against it every day. And that's just what it is.
Well, and on that note, I will say, I think one of the biggest things to fight racism is if we look within ourselves and find our own bias first and our own racism first. And that's the best place to start and figure out, because we're human. Number one, we're all going to have our own junk. Figure out what it is within yourself that is your own bias, recognize it first and foremost, and fix it. Because if
100%.
everybody works to fix themselves, that fixes everything else.
Well, and just in general, some of our best friends, I mean, Brian and I have these friends that, they're Black and they're some of our best friends. And to think that we would miss out on that just because of color, so many years ago. I mean, I can't name their names, but there are people that, if I needed them, they'd be here. I mean, Brian has had that experience where he called them and they're here like that. And we have white friends that don't do that. But anyway, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure to talk to you outside of the living room. So you guys, we will be back next week. We're going to probably try to cover either a true crime case because we haven't really covered one in a while. But thanks for hanging out with us. You have all officially met my husband, and we will see you guys all next week. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for having me. See y'all.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTKDB.com.